So, toward the beginning here, we talked very briefly about, racial equity, which, obviously 2020 was not a great year for many, many, many reasons. And, everything with George Floyd and, all of the horrible things that we saw in regard to racism and, a lot of fear and anger bubbling to the surface. Is there anything that Small Biz Cares is doing, in terms of racial equity? Obviously, we've seen a lot here in Columbus, unfortunately, that has not, that has made the national spotlight. That has not been something that we should be proud of. So I'm just curious, where Small Biz Cares falls within that spectrum.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I can kind of go into what we've done already, and what we're looking to do going forward.
Yeah,
And so, definitely over the summertime, we saw everything happening, and we wanted to make sure that we were part of the solution and the conversation. So we had a virtual event where we talked about the issues and really focused on what businesses can do tangibly, like
yeah,
tactically,
yeah,
because I think, we can all get caught up on talking about the issues and understanding those. But I think as a business owner, we want to figure out, okay, I think I understand the issues, to a good level at this point. Now, what can I do in my own business to be part of the solution? And so we have some content around that. We also had a fundraiser where we sold yard signs to support um, the Columbus Urban League and YWCA to focus on the issues of racism. And so we raised, I think, $6,000 for that during that fundraiser,
that's
which I
great.
think was great to be able to support them. So that's kind of what we did before. We've also, made sure that our board is more diverse, and
Yeah,
so going forward, we've added some more diversity to our board. And we haven't landed on this specifically yet, but we definitely want one of our board members to focus on diversity and inclusion, and specifically in two areas. One is our membership, to make sure that we're engaging with minority business leaders, women business leaders, but also in our programs and the nonprofits we serve. So I think we do a pretty good job. I mean, the nonprofits that we do volunteer with and support definitely do serve the communities, minority population communities, and address some of the issues that we're talking about here. But
right.
I think, we wanted to make sure that we actually have a focus on it. Not only because obviously it's been brought to the forefront, with everything happening, but I think it allows us to really, really make a huge impact in the community that I think um, we couldn't do if we didn't have that focus area. So that's what we're doing going forward, is really making sure our membership and our programs really address those issues. And I think we're on a good path right now. We've already in our last board meeting had a conversation around what this might look like in terms of making sure we're partnering on diversity and inclusion initiatives in the community. And so I think we're on a good path forward.
That's great. When you talk about diversity and inclusion initiatives, I mean, is there a specific area that you're looking to focus on, whether it's education or even, providing resources for young entrepreneurs of color, for example, to make sure that they're given that equity, or they have the tools and the resources necessary that they need to start their own businesses? I mean, is there a specific area that you hope to hone in on?
Yeah, so we've already focused and honed in on one area, which is our scholarship fund.
Yeah,
And so we made sure that part of our scholarship allocation goes to minority student, and we partnered with the Columbus State Community College here. And so last year we did give one scholarship to an African American student pursuing entrepreneurship and business. And so that's definitely one area where we're already seeing some impact, and as we go forward, we want to make sure that part of our scholarship contributions go to minority students. I think the second area, in terms of like specific initiatives, is going to be the nonprofits we volunteer with. And so I mentioned before, some of the nonprofits we already focus on. We volunteer with YWCA, we volunteer with Homeless Families Foundation, Life Care Alliance, different groups locally here that do support the minority populations. As we go forward, we want to identify additional nonprofits that address those issues in specific communities.
Yeah.
And then the third is, we did analysis of our membership, and we're at about 30% of our members' businesses reside within, communities within Central Ohio that are majority minority populated.
Right.
And so we want to make sure we grow that, engagement. So from 30%, we increase that number so that we can make sure that those businesses and those communities are represented, within small biz cares. And so, we can understand, what they care about, what initiatives they want, and, we can, start to tackle those.
What have been some of the challenges in growing that engagement? I mean, I have to obviously everything you're doing is phenomenal. I love seeing the opportunity for small businesses to give back, even when they're not bringing in seven figures in revenue. They're still able to contribute to the community in which they love. But I have to imagine at some point in time, it's not always super easy to grow that engagement, especially when it comes to, again, business owners who are wearing 38,000 hats. So what have been some of the struggles you've seen, and how have you attempted to overcome those?
Yeah, I mean, I would say the biggest struggle, and this is just the nature of it, is just time. We mentioned 30 hats, and I'm a business owner along with running small biz care. So, the time I have to be able to dedicate to member outreach, engaging with more small businesses, is limited. And so that's probably the biggest challenge, is just getting in front of folks and having one-on-one conversations. What I have found is when we are able to have a one-on-one conversation with a business owner and share the vision and what we're doing, people get inspired, and they figure out a way to join. And so it's really having those conversations, which is the biggest challenge. And I think obviously, not having our events, as we had our events, we had more and more engagement, and folks would tell their friends, hey, come to me to this event, check it out. And not having those in-person events has been a challenge. It's definitely resulted in, less engagement in our organization. And that's been at many business organizations out there. They're struggling with engagement because folks are not able to see people face to face as much and interact with them. So I think funding as a young nonprofit, not having the funding resources that, I think established organizations have, has been a challenge, but that's something we're tackling as we speak, hoping to have some funding here soon, to be able to hire some staff on to be able to manage growth.
Yeah.
And so, like any startup, I consider us a startup, right? It's funding, resources, time, all those different things.
And when you started this a couple years ago, what was that like, just trying to get traction in the community? And when you're starting from, something that's in your head to growing into what it's become, what have been some of the biggest difficulties, just especially in the beginning?
Yeah, that's a great question. Just awareness. I think when you start something new and you don't have you haven't done it yet.
Right.
You don't have the impact. We now have impact numbers, volunteer hours, members, partners, all these different things that we can talk to when we engage new folks. But at the beginning, we had none of that. All we had really was the mission and vision and what we plan to do. So that was probably the hardest part was, and I think it's for any business when you're starting out, is, how do you promote something and talk to something that hasn't been done yet, that maybe you're building. What it required from us and me was it required me to really talk in a way that was inspirational, that really hit at the specifics of that person and what they care about. I always tell folks, small biz cares, there is this, do good, philosophy of what we're doing. And we want you to join because you're inspired to give back. But we also understand that every business owner has a different mentality.
The Mosaic Life podcast is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Check out the full show notes at themosaiclifepodcast.com and sign up for the Circle newsletter for exclusive access to podcast content.